Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here with Greg Nagy and Elen and Sarah for another installment of HeroesX Office Hours for version 11 of HeroesX. And today we're talking about Hour 12, the discussion question for which is, we can say that Homeric poetry, unlike Hesiodic poetry, does not address directly this question, what is justice and what is injustice? But can we say that Homeric poetry does not address this question, what is right and what is wrong? That's a very subtle question, it seems to me.
Yes, there is a mention from a participant about the women of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And for her, it is quite clear that their loyalty to their husband and their country is considered good. For example, Penelope and Andromache, while infidelity and disloyalty is condemned, if we think of Clytemnestra.
Yes.
So right and wrong is addressed for...
Yes, and I do agree that the deep-seated moral sense of what is right and what is wrong is there in the Iliad. It's just that the words dikē and hubris, those two words are not used to express the equivalent of what is right and wrong. And that's what's so interesting about Hesiod, is that in Hesiodic poetry, these words just occur all the time, practically.
That's a very interesting angle from which to answer it. So the participant mentioned about looking at the female characters, because it's less obvious, or the commentary is less specific when it comes to characters like Achilles, for example, or Odysseus, even though they clearly do wrong things. But yeah, Clytemnestra really she is criticized, and Penelope is praised, for example.
Yes, yes. So it's as if the moral sensibilities are sharper for women and by women.
So another example that's mentioned here is the behavior of Agamemnon, and I think Achilles himself actually does describe it as hubris in Iliad 1. So he's talking about the behavior of Agamemnon initially toward the priest of Apollo,
Yes.
and then toward Achilles. They're presented like as wrong choices.
Yes.
And Achilles also makes some wrong choices about the body of Hector, for example. So is it about those choices? We quite often see that language of trying to decide, but sometimes they just go ahead and do stuff anyway.
Yes, yes. Yes, certainly the reference to human sacrifice in Iliad 23 is described in a judgmental way. I think the term is atastala erga or something, baneful deeds. So we're not saying, any of us, and I'm not saying that there is no sense of right or wrong. It's just that it's not as codified, not as clearly articulated in terms of the cosmic scheme of things as what we see in the Hesiodic theogony and Works and Days.
Yes.
I like that a lot.
What about the instances of divine interventions? It seems to imply judgment.
Yes. Well, okay. The most salient one is when Achilles is dragging the corpse of Hector in the Iliad, and the Council of the Gods in 24 decides this is wrong, or that it is unacceptable, and that is why there's a divine intervention, even though, of course, Poseidon doesn't agree with this decision, and Hera doesn't agree with this decision, but just the reaction of the divine order as a deciding body is indicative of, again, I think, a moral judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So a question that's come up is about, what about those sorts of actions that may or may not be right or wrong, but are perceived negatively by the characters? For example, when Achilles withdraws from the fighting, his companions then try to persuade him to come back with all sorts of different reasons. But thinking perhaps particularly of Ajax, that he still declines the invitation to come back. So then they're perhaps thinking of him negatively. Are they making judgments?
There, I'm less clear. I can't think of the master narrator making any kind of comment about that one.
And the participants saying, well, it seems to be a bit murky. So do we need actually a comment from the master narrator for us to get that clue, or can we pick up clues from the language itself that's being used?
Well, that's a very good question. And all I can say is that when I think of the moment where Achilles goes overboard, I think, and sacrifices humans at the funeral of Patroklos, there is some kind of narrative comment. Whereas what you're talking about would be a situation where you just hear what happened, and somehow the wording for kill or maim or boast is in a jarring context. There, I'm just not sure.
Mm-hmm. There's also an interesting comment about, if we consider Homeric poetry to be a living art, which begins anew with each performance, the participant asked, then what about the answer to that question would not be really so static, because then every performance would be new, and then the way that it would be received would change.
I see that sometimes what would be morally reprehensible in one era might not be in another era.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. Yes. But when it comes to something like human sacrifice, there I would say, as far back as I can go, this is just not approved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something just wrong about it, and I wouldn't expect to have variations on a theme for that, I don't think. With some other things, I don't know. I was thinking of Sarah's question about whether the wording would suggest disapproval. Can I mention one example I'm thinking of, which is at the very beginning of the Iliad, where Agamemnon makes this very crass remark about how he prefers Chryseis, his trophy wife, shall we call her, to Clytemnestra. And then he refers to Clytemnestra as Couridie, which means something like courted in my adolescent days. And there are all sorts of corny English expressions that correspond to that, like childhood sweetheart. It's as if he's so callous that he can just say, well, I had a first love, that's Clytemnestra, but I'm not interested in her anymore. So in other words, the way he speaks is the way a faulty character would speak. I don't think it's morally okay to say, well, I'm going to discard my childhood sweetheart. Something like that. Again, I'm putting too much of a spin on it by translating Couridie as childhood sweetheart. But when you think of what it really means, is somebody whom I courted, to the approval of society. Somebody who was my first wife, technically only wife. I don't know. So there's one instance where I think the way he refers to her does not reflect well on him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is this perception as to what is correct in society? We've talked a bit about, you know, the approval or otherwise of the gods as giving us clues, but also in terms of society, which is not necessarily anything much like Athenian 5th century society.
Yes, yes.
When perhaps the pinnacle of performance was.
This is just, I don't know, a bad character. How's that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and but what about when Odysseus is talking with Penelope, and is he mentioning her as ruling as a just king?
Oh, that. Oh, well, okay. That's one of Greg's exceptions. That's where dikē is mentioned, or at least a compound of dikē, dikē. Yeah, I think I actually say that in the Heroes book, that's a noted exception in the Odyssey. A noted exception in the Iliad is where Zeus is punishing an agricultural society by letting it be devastated by the floods that result from a thunderstorm. So there's kind of one example in the Iliad, one example in the Odyssey. And interestingly, both are similes. They're not the direct action.
What about the shield of Achilles? There's some place where there's some sort of I don't know what Greek word it is, but there's some sort of judgment going on between two parties.
Yeah. I think let's see. I think the word there is whoever has the straightest formulation. So that's the etymology of dikē, which is ultimately a straight line. Because, for example, the Sanskrit cognate dish is direction, like north, south, east, west. So directionality is straightness, is justice. So you have it, but you know, not in your face having it the way you do in Hesiod. But I grant you there too, it's a judgment. It's a contest who will have the most equitable formulation.
Mm-hmm.
And you've pointed this out, Greg, but I think it's so beautiful that in that scene of judgment, we don't find out who has the straightest formulation. It's an in-process moment.
It's true. It's something that is not decided there.
Yeah, it's what is the price of human life? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it one measure? Is it two measures? Is it half a measure?
Mm-hmm.
What substance?
I think it's might be if I remember well, gold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. But how come Hesiod then is talking so much about dikē?
I think it's not the person, so to speak. It's may I use your language? It's the genre.
Yes.
Oh, Greg, I know it's a slightly off the question, but we've talked quite a bit about performance of Homeric epic. How is Hesiodic poetry performed or conveyed?
Yeah, it's pretty clearly rhapsodic, just as Homeric poetry is rhapsodic, and there are references in much later sources about people who are rhapsodes who can perform Hesiod. And at one point, even in Plato, Socrates is asking Ion, the rhapsode, "Can you do Hesiod?" "No, can't do that." But the idea is that a rhapsode could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, friends,
I think it's time.
I think our time is up.
And we don't meet next week.
We
No.
don't meet next week.
We don't
No.
meet next week, but then the week after, we'll have an extravaganza of 13 and 14.
And 15. No?
15. Yes,
See how
let's see what happens. Okay.